Hello everyone, welcome to Film Recap. Today we are going to see a movie called Monolith. When the film begin, an advertisement for a futuristic car brand named Monolith. The ad's presenter claims that the vehicle has several special safety measures and has been named the safest car in the world. According to him, the automobile is quite modern and has several safeguards to protect its occupants from potential theft and harm, including robust body, sturdy tires and unbreakable glass. All of the features are controlled from within the car using an AI-enabled smartphone app. Lilith, a virtual assistant, facilitates interaction with the vehicle's user interface. In the next scene, a mother transporting her child to his grandmother's house in the same AI vehicle. The mother's name is Sandra, and we learn that her 2-year-old son's name is David. While speaking with Lilith, the AI assistant, due to his hectic schedule, her husband Cole, a pilot, was unable to accompany them. The car is so sophisticated that it can even determine how much each passenger weighs. Later, Cole contacts them to let them know how much he misses them and that he is at the central airport after work. Carl says goodbye and walks out, when there is a knock on the door. Sandra gives David her smartphone to keep him busy when he starts acting fussy. Sandra eventually stops at a petrol station at the side of the road. Then, as other girls can be seen laughing, she leads David into the bathroom to change his diapers. Sandra purchases her son's favorite goodies from the grocery located within the petrol station. Sandra sees someone attempting to break into her car outside while she is making her payment at the counter. Rather than worrying, she simply pulls out her phone and uses the smart app to lock the car. Sandra is too preoccupied to notice that David has been separated from her since she is too busy examining the problem. She cries and looks all over the supermarket for David after realizing he's gone. She assumes David is with him and dashes outdoors, even calling a stranger. Before discovering David with the same 3 women she had met at the restroom, she seemed to be completely frightened out. Sandra switches on the vault mode as soon as she has David in her car. She finally lets out a sigh of relief as a result of this disengaging her from the outer world. Sandra still has a long trip ahead of her before they get to her mother-in-law's house after leaving the patrol station. Sandra decides to phone her childhood friend Jessa to see how she is doing because she is bored from the lengthy drive. When she gets the call, Jessa tells her that she is at a hotel close to the main airport. She even admits to Jessica that she and Carl have been lodging at the hotel. When Sandra learns that her friend had an affair with her husband, she is crushed. After arriving at her mother-in-law's house, she gets so irritated that she doesn't even bother to go inside. She keeps calling Carl, but he doesn't answer and acts as though he's busy. Sandra, fed up with the lies, makes the decision to act independently and sets out to locate Carl at the main Los Angeles airport. A board on her path indicates that will take her roughly 320 miles to get to Los Angeles. They will slow down after a while when Lilith, the intelligent AI, reports that there has been a terrible accident on the main roadway. Then, in order to save them a great deal of time, she advises Sandra to take the bypass road. But the AI also notes that there are hardly any passengers on the road, which is empty. Sandra doesn't hesitate and chooses the other path, since she is determined to confront her husband. Later, when night falls, Sandra begins to have trouble operating the vehicle. Additionally, the fog on the route gets worse, making it harder for her to see the road ahead. She doesn't come across any other cars or human settlements along the road. But in the middle of nowhere, she discovers an electricity substation. She takes a quick look around before leaving in her car. The area is so empty that only untamed animals may be found there. Sandra, who is anxious, abruptly loses her concentration and runs into a deer that was attempting to cross the street. As usual, Sandra uses her smartphone to comfort David. He breaks down in tears due to the mishap. She then exits right away to see how the animal is doing, but it looks to be nearly dead. Sandra can't move her automobile forward because the deer is caught beneath the front end of it. Sandra forgets that she left David alone in the car while she tries to make sense of the incident. David inadvertently launches the AI car app when he is fiddling with his phone, without Sandra seeing. He navigates the opened app with his finger to enable the car's vault feature. This feature shields the occupants from various hazards and disruptions. Sandra tries her hardest to unlock the door after realizing how serious the situation is, but it's too late. Sandra tries her hardest to get David, who is 2 years old, to turn off the vault mode while she is stuck outside the car, but he doesn't comprehend a word and just keeps playing with the phone. Later, when Sandra becomes agitated and begins yelling at the young child, he is startled and puts the phone under his seat. Here Sandra discovers that the Monolith car's features are real and not only an advertisement. There is not even a single scratch on the window glass, even when Sandra tries to shatter it with a rock. Sandra chooses to look for other choices. After realizing that all of her efforts have been in vain, she starts to make her way back to the electrical substation that she had previously observed. She walks a while before arriving at the station, when she leaps over the fence and calls for assistance. However, she doesn't receive a response, and it appears that there are now no employees at the station. Sandra then goes into one of the rooms and discovers some essentials there. She brings a large wrench to assist her smash the glass of the locked automobile and a flashlight for use at night. She sees a wild animal pursuing her as she exits the substation. A coyote attacks Sandra as she is running back, forcing her to scale the car's roof. She tries her hardest to frighten the animal away, but it doesn't seem to mind. Finally, the coyote backs off as Sandra uses the wrench to hammer on the car in a last-ditch effort, and an alarm goes off. Sandra sees David's breathing problems at that same moment. She is able to soothe David in spite of the circumstances, and he eventually begins breathing and quickly nods off. After giving it some thought, Sandra also gets exhausted and nods off on the car's bonnet. Sandra awakens the following morning to find the sun shining brightly. She then dashes into the car to see how David is doing. Because of his dehydration and ravenous stomach, she sees David weak and fragile. One of the car's functions also shows the ambient temperature, which seems to be gradually rising. Sandra considers the situation to be a curse, because the location is totally remote and devoid of people. Sandra then makes the decision to get assistance and goes in that direction. She walks the lengthy distance, despite being quite dehydrated. Even though she is aware of the dangers of leaving David alone in the hot car, she is forced to get aid. Luckily, she finds a river where she can wash herself and drink. She takes a short break before continuing on her adventure, which includes difficult hills. Sandra eventually finds a jet at an abandoned airstrip after walking for several miles. In the meantime, Monolith car's interior temperature increases, triggering the emergency cooling fan to turn on immediately. Sandra arrives at the abandoned jet and finds a set of spare aviation tires, a gallon of gasoline, a lighter and several alcoholic beverages inside. She immediately attains the required supplies after drinking some booze. Sandra then burns the 2 tires with the gasoline in an attempt to get assistance. After that, she fills the gallon with river water. Sandra returns to the spot where she left David walking slowly. When Sandra rushes to the car in the following scene, she discovers David feeling weak and flushed. She attempts to call him out, but David remains motionless and unresponsive. The car's interior temperature has risen sharply, and the backup cooling fans are no longer functional. Sandra climbs the roof as soon as she sees her son's condition and pours the water she brought from the river, but her efforts are in vain. She begins using the wrench to smash the car glass once more, thinking that her child must perish inside the high-tech vehicle, but it is a waste of her energy. In an attempt to get the sensors to notice the smoke and open the windows, Sandra later tries to start a fire outside the vehicle, but nothing occurs. Rather, to stop the smoke from getting inside, the emergency cooling fans turn off. Sandra collapses from exhaustion and sees a vision of herself and Carl going to the scene of the accident a year later. She acknowledges her errors there, but she continues to hold Carl responsible for David's passing. She discovers it's all her dream when she wakes up to a noise after a while. Even worse, the coyote from last night shows up in front of her once more. Sandra chooses to hide from it and tries to scale the car's roof. However, she is unable to remain there due to the car's extraordinarily high temperature and instead sinks beneath it. When the coyote bites Sandra's leg there, she recognizes that the animal is pursuing the deer. The automobile begins to roll back as soon as the coyote pulls the deer out. The car had remained in that position because of the deer. Sandra tries to stop the automobile from sliding rearward as soon as she emerges from underneath it. The car keeps rolling backwards despite her best attempts, getting closer to a fall. But the car eventually comes to a stop as a little piece of granite blocks its path. Sandra recalls the cartoon she saw in the petrol station earlier, where the diamond was taken after the safe was broken, as she looks out from the edge. Then, in order to unlock the doors, she considers pushing the automobile down. Despite being fully aware that her intentions may have unintended repercussions, Sandra chooses to proceed, since she has no other option. She reaches for the wrench and begins to shatter the rock that was blocking the tire. Once the rock has been successfully removed, Sandra deliberately pushes the car down the cliff while David is still inside. Its built-in AI begins to work as soon as the car is launched into the air and recognizes that it is falling from a height. Without endangering David, the car's features start working and adjusting its balance while analyzing the force of gravity to fall straight. The doors eventually open because the vehicle was built to switch off the vault mode in the event of an accident, so that rescuers could enter. Sandra descends the cliff and goes to the automobile as soon as it hits the ground. The car seemed to have been dropped there by someone, even after the catastrophic fall. Sandra quickly removes David from the car and unlocks his garments to help him cool down. After discovering the locked door open, Sandra decides to leave the location as soon as possible after noticing David's poor health. The entire system is rebooted before Sandra gets behind the wheel. Sandra puts the vehicle in extreme off-road mode and begins scaling the cliff in front of her with Lilith's assistance. The car appears to be designed for incredibly hard conditions and handles the high cliff with ease. Sandra luckily finds her chosen off-road and travels to the hospital. In the final scene of the movie, Sandra and David arrive at the hospital. Sandra is kept on the hospital bed next to David, who has multiple tubes attached to him. Sandra worries for David before he opens his eyes and calls her mommy, for the first time. As the movie ends, Sandra is overjoyed when her child calls her out.